Next on Garden Line, the rock garden at McCrory Gardens in Brookings, and the waste chemical disposal program.
Here we have an example of a product that has separated out.
This program is funded in part by Swiftel Communications.
Welcome to Garden Line. I'm Tammy Watson. Tonight on our show, we'll visit with the Pesticide Education Coordinator from South Dakota State University. He'll explain what a waste pesticide is and tell us about a program designed to properly dispose of these chemicals. During our show's Garden of the Week feature, we'll visit one of McCrory Gardens' theme gardens to see what beauty grows in a rock garden. And as always, our panel of lawn and garden experts will answer your questions, so get ready to call in. Our panelists are here with the most up-to-date information about gardening, lawn care, insects, trees, and a host of other lawn and garden concerns. Joining me in the studio to answer your questions tonight are John Lundgren, USDA Research Entomologist.
Hello, thanks for having me
Thanks
here.
for messing up your title. Sorry about that.
Right, yeah.
Also here, Jerry Mills, Brown County Extension Horticulture Educator.
Hello there, and greetings from the North Country.
Good to see you again. Mike Mechnig, Extension Weed Specialist.
Afternoon, Tammy.
All right. And John Ball, Extension Forestry Specialist.
Hi.
The phone number for you to call in with your lawn and garden questions is 1-866-595-SDSU. Again, that phone number is 1-866-597. Sorry, I think I mutilated that. 1-866-595-7378. Helping answer the phones tonight are the Minnehaha Master Gardeners. Remember, when you call in with your question, please provide as much information as possible about your garden problem. Be ready with a good description of the situation, information about when the problem first appeared, whether this concern is affecting any surrounding plants, and what the moisture and soil conditions are. Now, before we get to your questions, we have some important and timely information for you. Garden Line went on location with Extension Pesticide Education Coordinator Jim Wilson to learn more about the Waste Pesticide Disposal Program. Up next, Wilson explains when a pesticide can be considered waste or unusable and how to prepare that chemical for proper disposal.
Hello, I'm Jim Wilson from South Dakota State University, the Extension Pesticide Education Coordinator. Would like to talk to you about that collection of pesticides you have back in that little storage shed that you go to from time to time. It may be a good opportunity to go to that shed and take a look at the collection that you have. If some of those products are old or may not look to be usable, we have a program that you may be able to use. South Dakota Department of Ag has a unusable pesticide collection program that we, the Extension Service, help to promote. And we'd like to spend some time talking to you about that. This program is free of charge. If you have a program or a pesticide that qualifies, we need to get those products registered with South Dakota Department of Ag. To determine whether a product fits the criteria, they need to be one of three things. Either they need to be a product that is no longer registered for use, and we have an example. This is a product that's been around probably for 30 years. It looks not much different than what we typically have now, Weed Be Gone. But as we look at the active ingredient label, it contains a product called Silvex, which is a product that contains a 2,4,5-T, which has not been registered for use for, I say, about 30 years. So this is one that's no longer legal to use. The second criteria may be a product that's unusable. Here we have an example of a product that has separated out, and sometimes we will see the product settle to the bottom and not be able to be mixed back up. If you're able to remix it, it probably can be used. The third criteria is perhaps an unknown, and unfortunately Often we have many of those. Someone will buy a large quantity and pour it off into small containers, and then after a while we forget what's in the container. So if the pesticides you have fit one of those 3 criteria, by all means make sure you get it registered. You can register either online at South Dakota Department of Ag's website or stop in at your local extension office. When handling these products, be sure you take care of yourself. Wear rubber gloves and store them properly. I would suggest storing them in a plastic container, or a plastic sack, perhaps in a box. Seal that box up tightly and keep it in an area where it will not spill. If you need to transport to the collection site, which usually are held in the fall, that should not be done in a car or even in the trunk of a car, but probably in an open pickup. If we can get these products registered soon, the South Dakota Department of Ag may be able to collect those as they're out about across the state. Look over your products, see what you have, and we have a program to take care of them.
As Jim Wilson just explained, these chemicals need to be registered with the South Dakota Department of Agriculture before they can be collected and disposed of. You can jot down the web address you're seeing right now to learn more relevant information, including an explanation of when a pesticide needs to be considered unusable and the registration form that Wilson spoke about. These can be found at the website listed on your screen. All right, now back to the action here in the studio. John Lundgren, topic of the week. What do you want to talk to us about?
Well, something that a lot of people have been seeing around South Dakota, and I've got one of them here. We've recently been driving around the state looking in cornfields, and a lot of the farmers have come up to us, man, we're seeing a lot of dragonflies. And so that's kind of my topic of the week this week. And we brought this nice big green darner here. I don't know whether you guys can see that or not here, but
Hold it, show it to that,
how should I go there?
there.
You getting that, or?
Yep.
No.
They'll be able to get a close-up
All
of
right.
there, I think.
Anyways, these things are aquatic animals, right? The naiads, the little immatures, live in rivers and lakes and things like that. But a lot of times we'll see these things flying just miles away, and they're establishing territories, and they're doing a lot of good things out there. These are some of the friendlies that we have out in our gardens. These things are eating tons of mosquitoes out there, so it's a good thing that we've got such high densities of these dragonflies this summer. So that's something that you guys probably all have been seeing.
Okay, so is there anything I should do to promote them hanging out in my garden?
Oh,
or
just
cross my fingers?
don't nail your whole yard with various insecticides and things like that. I think these guys are. Don't be afraid of them. These aren't something that you want to be killing out there.
Okay.
These are our friends. So, in terms of promotion, if you've got mosquitoes, and I think everybody's got mosquitoes this summer, these guys are going to be around. So.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now, are we moving on, or do you have another one for us?
Well, I guess I could show you another one, but
Oh, we'll keep moving on.
We'll keep
come
moving.
back to you.
That's fine. That's fine.
Jerry Mills, step up. What do you got?
All right. Most people have a few iris in their landscape, someplace, flower beds or whatnot. And July and August is the time to divide those iris. They seem to have a way of overpopulating themselves very quickly and growing on top of each other and crowding each other out. And so August is the month that we have left to lift and divide and transplant those bearded iris. Now this needs to be done about every 3 to 5 years, depending on how far you plant them apart initially. And they do recommend that you plant them 12 to 24 inches apart so that you can last that 3 to 5 years before you have to divide them again. And you crowd those plants up too much, they're going to be starving each other out. You're going to develop some disease problems in there. And so spread them out, let them get good air circulation through. Dividing, the actual dividing process here, the underground stems are called rhizomes, and that's what you're going to dig up. You're going to dig up that whole clump. You're going to cut the leaves down to about 1/3 of their original height. You're going to wash those rhizomes off. Sometimes quackgrass or creeping Jenny gets encroaching into these.
How about always?
Always. All right. So you're going to wash them off, clean them up so that when you put them in this new bed, you aren't carrying along some disease problems, insect problems, or weed problems. And then cut each one of those sections so that it has a fan of leaves, a healthy little short segment of that rhizome, and some good healthy roots underneath that rhizome. And then you want to plant them in a fertile, well-drained soil. And I really emphasize well-drained, because if they're sitting in water for any amount of time or saturated soil, they're going to root rot. They're going to rot away, and you're going to have big problems. You want to plant them just below the soil surface, no deeper than ½ inch over the top of those rhizomes. Then water them in this fall, put a little bit of straw over them, preferably weed seed-free straw. Flax straw is a good choice for that. And then remove that in the spring. That first year after transplanting, you're not going to get too much as far as blossom, but year 2 and 3, boy, they're going to be in their glory.
Okay. Now, when you say wash the rhizomes off, just get some water and...
With a good forceful jet of water.
Okay.
Not so forceful that it blows them apart, but washes them off real well.
All right. Thanks,
right.
Jerry. Mike McNig, what do you got for us?
Well, we got one of the most troublesome invasive weeds we're going to talk about tonight that's just starting to flower in a lot of areas right now. It's a weed that's kind of a pretty one, so you might be tempted to let it go, but don't. Be watching for this one. It's yellow toadflax. Just starting to flower now. It depends on the moisture you're getting. Some people are really dry this year, some people are really wet in South Dakota, so a lot of variation. But this weed is all over eastern South Dakota and, of course, in the Black Hills area, and very invasive. Here we got a picture of a plant near Brookings that came in with maybe some mulching material around a tree. So be watching for this one. We take a closer picture here at the flowers, and we can see it's a typical snapdragon type flower. Used to be sold as an ornamental, as wild snapdragon or butter and eggs. So it's a fairly pretty plant, but don't let the beauty deceive you. This is one you want to control. The next photograph, we can see this is what it'll look like most of the year in your lawn. It'll just be small, kind of inconspicuous plants, but these plants are spreading by roots. And so you'll get a patch that'll get bigger and bigger every year if you don't do anything to control it. So it'll certainly persist in lawns, so you want to watch out for it. Last picture, we can see this is a plant that you can see has been mowed off, but then it just keeps sending up a flower. And so it'll certainly persist in lawns and seed out and become a bigger nuisance. So yellow toadflax, just be watching for it. A lot of people have small patches right now, and so that's manageable. The longer you let it persist in your lawn, the more difficult it'll be to control. So do whatever you can to control it as soon as possible.
Go out and pull it, or what?
Yeah, if you have a small patch, you can just pull them out, but it'll spread by roots. It'll come back, but just keep pulling as you can every year, or use a typical lawn broadleaf herbicide, Weed Be Gone, Trimec, things like that. But even with herbicides, it's going to be a multiple year approach. So very difficult weed. Just be watching for it and control the patches while they're small.
Okay, thank you. John Ball, world-renowned forestry expert.
Yeah, right.
What do you got for us?
Well, the last time we were both on the show, you said, well, what bug's named after South Dakota? And we actually have one. It's called the Black Hills Beetle. And it's now called the mountain pine beetle. It was first identified in the Black Hills, but since it's throughout the West and we don't want to take any ownership of it, it's now called mountain pine beetle. But
tell us about what that bug is.
Well, I brought some with me today. Dead. They're in alcohol, so they're happy. But there's only about 5 or 6 of them in here, but people always want to know, how can something that little kill a tree? Well, it doesn't do it in groups of 5, it does it in groups of hundreds, but it literally will mass attack a tree, and they're doing that right now. The peak flight corresponds with rally. Motorcyclists and bugs tend to dominate the woods for this week. But if you go out and look at pine trees, they're going to have all these bubblegum pitch masses on them, and that's the beetles as they're attacking. If you haven't done anything to protect your tree, it's too late. You should have sprayed a month ago, at least. And if you live in town, it's really not an issue. But if you have one of those properties that borders the hills, you say, gee, I should get out and spray. Don't. They're already getting into your tree, and nothing's going to protect your tree once they're inside. And once they're inside your tree, generally they're going to kill it. And next spring, they'll emerge out of their dead host and fly and attack another tree. And they're doing it quite successfully in the Black Hills. Large area of the hills, if people go out there, are just covered with standing dead trees from the attack of this mountain pine beetle.
And you said it was originally named after the Black Hills. Is it native to the Black Hills?
It's native there. You know, people say, why can't we eliminate it? It's been there as long as there's been pines.
What's the best management technique to minimize the damage?
Oh, that's a real easy one. I mean, that's just like textbook. You know, you thin trees.
Get rid of the infection.
No. You thin trees. I mean, the problem we have in the Black Hills is there's too many trees. And I know that sounds odd, but we've got more trees standing on there now than they did back in the 1800s. And mountain pine beetle likes dense stands. And so what it's going to do is it's going to thin out those stands and open them up. Now, we can do it, or you can let the beetle do it. And right now, since there's a lot of dense stands, the beetles are doing a good job of it. Now, landowners, not homeowners where you got 2 trees, but landowners can work with the Department of Ag, with their service foresters, and develop a thinning plan to open up their stands enough that they are less susceptible to the beetle. But that's really the best management tool, is space out the pine trees so they're not standing next to each other and too crowded.
Okay. Did you have something else for us or not yet?
No, that's just their home. So.
Oh, that is the bark where they live. All right, we're going to dive into the questions. And a question from Bryant, South Dakota. In spraying for weeds, what concentration of dicamba can you use, and how close can you get to trees and bushes?
No.
Oh, come on.
Come on, nothing, man.
If you use it as a label suggests, it'll be just fine.
Okay. You're right.
Everything in moderation. That's the key.
Well, Santa Claus does not exist either.
Okay, let me explain.
Tell me why this is an issue.
Okay, well, for one thing, the rate is always, we get those questions every once in a while on glyphosate and dicamba, what rate. You really, I mean, all these products that you buy are sold at different concentrations, so you really just have to look at the label, follow the label, calibrate your sprayer so you know how much water you're spraying out, so that way you know you're putting the right amount of material out. That's one thing that people often don't think of. So calibration and reading the label is key. Now, with dicamba, you can get, if you get too much around the base of the trees, the roots can take it up and cause some leaf cupping. So that's the key.
Hence the concern from our forest.
It's also a little more than cupping.
Okay,
it's
it
called
can be.
Death.
If you get carried away, that can happen. But also this time of year, and oftentimes we really don't recommend spraying this time of year, partly because it's hot this time of year, and that dicamba can volatilize, and those vapors can go up into the tree. So either it can go up by the roots or go up by the vapors. So waiting until fall is a good idea, especially for those tough weeds like dandelions and creeping Charlie and creeping Jenny, those types of things. So watch out. I'd wait till fall and just don't get too much around the base of the trees. One application at a labeled rate, and calibrate your sprayer so you know how much you're putting down.
Okay.
The last point, though, since we're talking dicamba, which does a better killer trees than many insects, is that on the label it says don't put it within the root zone of trees. It says that. What a lot of people don't realize is roots go out as far as a tree is tall. And so it
Or
doesn't.
about 2 times the diameter.
Well, yeah, it depends on the tree, of course. You get a thin poplar, it goes out. But if you take the height, if you get a 30-foot tall tree and you stay 30 feet away, then I would accept it. I wouldn't be okay with it, but I would accept it. But yeah, if you follow label directions, I'm with you. But most people don't follow label directions. They apply it, and then they call me and say, well, what insect's killing my tree? Well, a 2-legged insect that's standing in front of me.
Another point, though, is we recommend spot applications rather than broadcast applications, because that'll save a lot of that exposure as well. So just go out there and spot treat. You should be fine.
Okay. All this consternation about the use of dicamba, is there an alternate that you suggest, an alternative chemical that would accomplish the same thing?
Not really. I mean, a lot of people just use 2,4-D, but that has a limited spectrum of weed activity, and so, yeah, there's really no better option.
All right. Question from Claremont. They have a Harrelson dwarf apple tree. Apples are falling off the tree. Tree is on the east side of the house. The apples are bigger than a golf ball. Half have fallen off already, and the leaves look fine.
I'll take a stab at that.
You want to take that, John?
Yeah, I'll take it and you jump in afterwards, because this could be a couple things. We don't have the tree or the apples here. Now, sometimes trees do self-thin. They'll drop extra fruit, but we're really kind of behind that. They usually do it when they're smaller. If the leaves look fine, we can rule out apple scab or cedar apple rust, and we're seeing a lot of that this year because of the rain. But the other problem is apple maggots are kicking in right about now. And if you get infested fruit, what'll happen is that'll drop prematurely. Now, if it is apple maggots, if you slice those apples open and find these little brown trails going through there, or you even find a little insect that look like about the size of a grain of rice, then what you're doing is you're looking at apple maggots, and the best thing to do is clean up and dispose of all that fallen fruit, because you're eliminating the population for next year. But that's my best guess on that information. What do you think, Jerry?
Well, I'd add one more thing. Being from up in that country, Claremont is just north and east of Aberdeen. The water spigot has shut off up there, and all of a sudden we've gone very dry and hot and humid, and there's big cracks showing up in the lawns, in the gardens and whatnot. And I suspect that this might be an additional drop of fruit now that tree has realized, by gosh, life isn't as good as what it started out to be. Maybe we need to thin some more of this fruit out. Just a possibility.
And you're right, that could be a possibility too. The other thing we'll see, if it goes to dry, is the fruit will crack as it's developing, and so that could also be a possibility. The same way where the fruit that's remaining is cracked on it, then that would lend itself more to this other problem. And of course, the one that we want to remind people, nothing says it has to be a problem. You could be apple maggots and the dry weather. I mean, pests come in multiples, not single.
What would happen if I accidentally ate an apple maggot or cooked it up with some applesauce? Come on, I'm trying to be economic and use the fallen fruit. Bad idea.
We eat so many insects every day of our lives that we have no idea. I don't want to freak people out, but this is actually...
You accomplish that pretty well.
Yeah, in fact, Western cultures are some of the only ones in the world that don't rely on insects as a major part of their diet. It's not going to actually hurt you in any way.
It's just extra protein. Right?
It is actually extra protein. Yeah, it's benefiting you, right?
Good for you. I mean, it's an apple that obviously hasn't been sprayed right.
Right. Yeah.
and you get a protein meal in there too.
Yeah.
I think we could be marketing this stuff. Maggot-ridden apples.
We'll work on that title. We'll work on that. Okay, another question. I think this is going to come over here for you, John. Sioux Falls family is swarmed by mosquitoes. They have 6 acres, would like advice on something to spray that would help with mosquitoes and would not harm people, pets, or garden plants.
All right. Well, let's see here. Mosquitoes are extremely abundant this year. There's no doubt about this, and it's across the state. I mean, we're seeing levels that have not been recorded in a very, very long time. If they've got any like containers or waterways on their or bodies of water, especially like standing water, real still water, put a dunk of a BTI. These are little floating. Yeah. Thank you. Little donuts. Don't eat them. You put it in there, it floats, it dissolves, and then there's food in there with an insecticide that's extremely safe. It kills only aquatic diptera, which are flies and mosquitoes and things like that. So very narrow in spectrum, pretty safe. Aside from that, avoid or put bug spray on whenever you're outside. This is just a general rule of thumb that I think people should abide by. And then, check your activity patterns and stay in and watch the late news instead of going out if the mosquitoes are really bad. Window screens are really effective.
Do you have any experience with the, it's a name brand, a little clip fan that supposedly you wear and it fans out? I don't actually have to put the sticky stuff on.
Yeah, so
there's
a lot of these things for mosquitoes. It's a real plague of humanity. So one thing that I've heard works really well and is a new system where it's split between an attractant that you put out, because the mosquitoes are attracted to lactic acid, which we produce by our muscles, and CO2, and then heat. So it produces all those things, and you put the attractant at the outside of your lawn, and then you put the deterrent, which is like sort of I don't know the exact chemical, but think citronella kind of a thing, near where you're going to be hanging out, maybe on your patio or something like that. And I've heard that this is extremely effective, so I think that's worth a search online if you can find it. Okay. Skeeter Deleter sounds, rings a bell. Okay. Not that as a federal employee I don't endorse any products.
All right, well, I better keep moving on. We've got some pictures with this question here. From, let's see, Jenny McDaniel. It says, "Good evening, gardeners. Live in Watertown. My small garden is on the south side of the house. I've submitted a picture of my green bell pepper. Can you tell what's happened to it? I did sprinkle some 7 powder on it because something appeared to be chewing on the leaves. They're in the same condition. Is it sunburned? I'm also growing pumpkins, very large ones. Did I overwater it? What seems to be dying at the root and at the beginning of the plant? Our ground here is very bad in clay, but there aren't any other choices." So peppers, pumpkins, clay soil.
Okay. I'll take the pepper first of all. We all know that vegetables and all living plants need a certain amount of sunlight in order to thrive and be productive. Certain amount of sunlight is good, but in this case, what this pepper is suffering from is an abundance of sunlight, especially being planted on the south side of the house. There's another accompanying picture that we received on this, and it shows that these plants are very short, and the foliage is down near the ground, and the peppers are being produced up on top of the plant. And so there's no foliar shade for these plants either. And so these pepper fruit are exposed to the south sun on the south side of this house, and they're literally cooking in their skin is what it amounts to. It's called Sunscald. And the best thing I could recommend for these little short, lack of foliage type pepper plants in order to get some decent pepper fruit off of it is to provide some sort of a sunscreen over the top of these plants. And they might later on in the season actually get some good fruit off of that.
So get creative with some lattice and
yeah,
help it out.
Exactly.
All right, here's a question for you from Volga. When is butternut squash ready to pick? I want an answer right now.
Okay, we can do that. Butternut squash, you need to look at the ground spot where it's sitting on the ground. And when that area there starts to turn an orange, that signifies that that squash fruit is ready to be harvested or is mature and can be harvested. There is another way. Butternut squash falls in the winter squash family. And when those fruits are mature, they develop a very hard rind on them, a hard skin, if you will. And you can't penetrate it with your thumbnail. Up to that point, before they're mature, it's still soft, and you can punch through with your thumbnail. So that's 2 ways of telling how they're ripe.
That's useful for me. Oh, I'm going to toss in another personal question. I always get butternut and acorn squash confused because butternut looks like an acorn to me.
And rightfully so, because the names don't fit.
Okay.
You're right. The butternut looks like an acorn. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
I don't know who named them, but if I had the privilege of going back and name them, I'd change them.
Okay. Thank you. I feel better about that. All right. A question from Sisseton. Last week, John Ball talked about spray or chemicals for trees with apples, but you didn't. The caller didn't catch what the spray was and how and when to apply.
Oh, well, they were probably talking about apple maggot because we did have a question on that. And really, malathion gets used a lot for that. And you started your spraying about the 4th of July and about every 2 weeks. So until about the end of August, depending upon when you're harvesting your apples. Some apples are going to be ready here in the next couple of weeks. State Fair, for example, and so you always have to take a look at the re-entry period. It'll always say don't apply it within X number of days of harvest, but otherwise the month of July and August you do want to be treating for apple maggot, and if you haven't sprayed yet, don't. It isn't going to help the apple maggots that are already in there, and a lot of them are already in.
Okay. I'm going to go to another question with some images here, and this is from Yankton. They just moved to rural Yankton this spring. There's a whole garden plot of this image, and there it is, in a flower garden. They were planted in rows like they're supposed to see there. They're supposed to be there. Waited all summer to see what they would be, and now they're seeding out like weeds. Please don't make too much fun of us if we took care of weeds all summer. Do you know what this is?
Yeah, well, it is a weed, and
Oh, no.
and not. I mean, I certainly don't want to make fun of them because they're not the first person that has kept this plant thinking it's going to be a beautiful flower someday, and then this is what you get, and it's quite a disappointment. So this weed is, if you want to know, it's mare's tail or a horseweed, and you're in rural Yankton, so this is a common cropland type weed, especially in no-till fields. It's a winter annual, so it kind of germinates in the fall, and then it'll start growing again in the spring, so it can get a jump on everything else and be quite competitive. So it's going to produce a lot of little seeds, and they're going to have a little plume on them to move in the wind a little bit. So yeah, I'd mow it off and control it because it's not going to get any prettier than that. So no sense in keeping it around.
They say a weed is just a plant in the wrong spot,
right.
so if you adjust your attitude. All right, a question from Sioux Falls. In regard to the threat of emerald ash borer to ash trees, some businesses are advertising a product, and I'm going to spell it here, XYTECCT, Zytec,
Yep.
and encouraging an application in the autumn for 12 months of protection. Is this a realistic claim, and how practical is it if you're dealing with a large tree in excess of 20 years of age? Do you need to be able to reach all the limbs, some of which are over 20 feet off the ground?
Well, let's start with the first thing, and that is emerald ash borer. It's not here. All right, as far as we know, it's not here. It's in Minneapolis, St. Paul's, the closest place. And almost every state has a recommendation, no treatments until it's found within your county or 15 to 20 miles. So treating now is really premature. I would not recommend it at all. What you're essentially doing is spending money, wasting it for the most part. The chemical that you're putting in, Zytec, is very effective. It does work. If the emerald ash borer was found in Minnehaha County or the adjacent county, and you were looking at that as a treatment for your tree, I would say certainly go ahead and do it. It's fairly expensive, as all these treatments that work are. Triage is another one that's an excellent treatment. And I will say right now, when emerald ash borer does arrive, the treatments that are provided by commercial tree companies are far better than anything the homeowner can buy. So if once it arrives, then do call a company to have it treated. These treatments are applied at the base or in the soil surrounding the tree as soil injections, which is the best way to apply them. But right now, I know we're getting people saying, well, gee, I'm getting a call to go out and treat my tree for emerald ash borer. Don't. It could be years. It could literally be a decade or more before it arrived in Minnehaha County. It is going to show up in South Dakota one of these days, and when it does, it doesn't mean it's through the whole state. You know, look at Minnesota. It's found in one area of Minnesota, and as far as they know, that's it. So don't jump the gun. Putting chemicals down, I think everyone would agree that putting chemicals down when there's no need for them is an absolute waste. And is
more harm than good.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, these things are killing other things too. So let's just kind of hold off. You know, save your money, go fishing. That's a better use of your time.
Okay. Now, John, real quick, what are some of the beneficial insects that might be harmed if I got carried away and didn't listen to John's advice?
Boy, a tree is an incredible ecosystem, you know. I mean, you've got all kinds of species. You've got a whole food web on that tree that is supported. And you start pumping insecticides in, even though there may not be direct contact with some of your friendlies that are out there, it is passed up through the food chain.
Okay.
And the other part too, John, is the fact that some of these, and again, these are all excellent chemicals. If the insect were here, I'd say use them. But they're applied as soil drenches. And so you're picking up a lot of other things in the soil as well. So very effective, but premature.
Okay. Now, recently Garden Line stopped by McCrory Gardens in Brookings, South Dakota to visit the Rock Garden, one of their theme gardens. Over 100 tons of quartzite rocks simulate a narrow canyon entrance. This leads visitors to a circular grassy area surrounded by quarry walls 4 to 6 feet high. A variety of herbaceous alpine plants, shrubs, and trees decorate the rock garden. Here's a brief glimpse at what this garden features. Thank you for joining us, and we're quick hopping back to a question that I guess I tore past a little too quick in the first part of the show. Back to, it's a pumpkin vine, and the question is they're growing large pumpkins, and it looks like it's dying at the root and at the leaves at the very beginning of the plant is looking poorly. So you gentlemen have an answer here.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, again, this is one from, what, down Yankton,
Yes,
where they're growing this
I
on the
think
south
so,
side of
yeah.
the house?
Watertown, this is Watertown.
Oh, Watertown, but still, if I remember right, same as the peppers, south side of the house, and boy, that's a very stressful environment for these plants. I think if you just set the water and just let it keep running, sitting on the south side of the house, you might have a fighting chance moisture-wise. Then there's another factor that has taken place here. The slide that's up right now shows the swelling at the base of the plant, at the base of the vine, right where it comes out of the ground. And this is very symptomatic of the squash vine borer. The adult is a clear wing moth that you'll see flitting, hovering about pumpkins and squash and those cucurbit type crops. Not so much on the cucumbers, but the large vined types. And they'll lay an egg there, and that egg hatches into a little larva which bores into the inner hollow stem of the vine. And next thing you know, you see this swollen area at the base of the stem. You see some frass coming out, some plant juice coming out, that sort of thing. And that's a sure sign that that borer is in there feeding on that vascular system. And so your challenge is to find that area, take a good sharp knife, and split it lengthwise. To split that stem lengthwise, lay it open a little bit, and find that borer in there.
So do a little
and
surgery.
physically take it out.
Okay.
You know, if you're a little bit squeamish, don't take it out with your fingers. Use the same knife, you know, to take it out and destroy it. And then what you do is you take some moist soil and you put it back over that slit that you put in the stem, and it will heal back over. And usually it will recuperate from this and start new good growth again if you catch it early enough.
Okay, that's really interesting because I lost a zucchini plant this summer. Now I know why. That
Could
was
very
it.
well be, yeah.
That was it.
Zucchinis as well.
Okay. All right, a question about a pear apple. What are they? Can you eat or harvest them? They're very bitter. I don't even know what a pear apple is.
Well, and that's a good description of it. I heard it called that way. What it is, it's a pear that's rounded and red. And those tend to be the Asian pears. In fact, we have some that are cultivars. Summercrisp is a pear that has some Asian genes in it. And that pear is somewhat rounded and reddish. And now that is a good pear. But many of our Asian pears are used in windbreaks and that, and for breeding purposes. But if you ever had a pear, and a Bartlett pear, you bite into it and it's buttery and flavorful, and that's wonderful. If you ever had a pear that tastes like it's been rolling on a beach for a week, it's so gritty. Yeah, I mean, now you got it in your mind. That's going to be one of these pear apples, is that they're filled with grit cells. Okay. If you say, you know what, I really don't need my molars anymore, then go ahead and grind them out on those things. So, yes, you can eat them, but then why? And, and you can harvest them, but then again, why?
Is it just the texture that's nasty or the flavor as well? Because I boil stuff up and make pear sauce in the kitchen. I've done that. Not with this kind, but... Have
some beach sand and tell me if there's any flavor in that texture.
Okay,
right?
Point taken. Point taken. A question from Lennox. Recently, most of my garden spent a week or so covered with about 4 to 6 inches of foul flood water. The plants died with the exception of carrots and eggplant. Prior to flooding, I had been battling tomato blight for over a month. Despite that, the fruits seemed to be doing well. So, her questions have to do with preparing the soil for next season. Should I put down fungicide now or early in the spring to combat potential third year of tomato blight? And 2, do I need to treat the soil after it's flooded to ensure the safety of future garden produce? Very timely questions.
Yes, very much so, with all the flooding down through that area. Unfortunately, they're getting too much water and other parts of the state aren't getting enough. But that flooding is serious stuff when it gets on gardens, especially if it has pathogens in it, human waste, livestock waste. you don't want to play with that. You don't want to take the risk of eating that vegetable fruit that has been inundated with this potentially foul sewage and flood water. So the recommendation would be no. It's getting too late in the season to wait long enough for the pathogens to be rendered safe or not a risk, harmless. Yeah. So I would not recommend eating anything out of that garden for the remainder of the season. Just write it off. Be on the safe side.
Prep for next year.
Prep for next year. They mentioned a fungicide. Well, the fungicides that we have are not soil applied fungicides to take care of pollutants like that. They are preventative fungicides to stop a fungal disease or a.
Well, she mentions tomato blight.
Yeah. Tomato blight will be in the area if it's the right season for tomato blight anyway, regardless of what you do. What you can do next season is from the day that you plant that transplant, you start applying a fungicide, a preventative fungicide, usually with the active ingredient chlorothalonil, to put an armor coating on those leaves so that the fungus spores cannot set up housekeeping. And so it protects the plant from the tomato blight. As far as the soil and prep for next year, you rototill that soil, you work it up, the soil organisms there are going to break down those pollutants, and by next year, next spring, it's going to be safe to raise another garden there.
Okay.
In fact, Jerry, wouldn't it, I mean, you're absolutely right. These gardens should not be harvested. But, you know, if they clean it out now, one, they're going to get rid of a lot of those leaves that are going to harbor fungi for the winter.
Yep.
So we could clean all that out. And what about putting in just kind of a green manure crop and till it under for next spring?
That's a very real possibility. Yeah, that'd be a good.
Yeah, because you know they can clean it out and still get something planted in it. They're not going to eat it. This is just a green manure that's tilled in and added to the organic matter. And
green manure crop, what might refer to oats, spring wheat, something that's going to grow for a while, but yet be killed by first frost. And then you dig it under, and it adds organic matter back into the soil.
Right, and I imagine less weed problems doing that.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just going to be a weedy mess by next spring if you don't do anything with it now.
Okay. A question about anthills. We've got a lot of anthills in our lawn, and I have 3 young children who play outside all the time. Do you know of a kid-friendly, organic way to kill the ants?
So I'm a little biased here. I mean, we actually I purposefully grow ant hills in my lawn with the kids, and I watch them over the season. These are actually a really beneficial thing for a lot of lawns, as long as they're not getting in your house. I mean, that's where you draw the line, right? Carpenter ants are a big deal too. If they're biting the kids or something like that, then this is also an issue. And I think that probably the easiest, cleanest way to do it, turn the hose on it for a couple, 10, 15 minutes a day until you don't see any more ants anymore. The problem with a lot of these ants, bees, wasp nests is that you have to get the queen. And in the case of the ants, the queen is usually deep, deep down under the soil.
How far down?
Oh, it depends on the species and the age of the colony, but meters. As in,
deep.
Yes. Sometimes,
okay.
Especially for some of these harvester ants that we have out near Pear. So if you keep on hitting them, you're gonna overwhelm that colony eventually. So if you've got to kill them, then use the hose. But otherwise, you know, I mean. It could be a really fascinating way to teach kids about ants a little bit more, you know.
Hey, you're kind of on that live and let live
I
sort of
tell
thing
you, I feel like
here.
I'm a tree hugger today. What's going on?
Shove you two sitting together there. Okay, moving on. Speaking of trees, caller wants to identify, or actually this is an email question, wants to identify a tree growing wild in their front yard. It's only about 4 or 5 years old, so the leaf it has now may not be what it looks like when it's mature. I've been trying to figure it out, but I gave up. And they apparently had sent a leaf, but I don't have it with me, or a photo. It has an alternating pattern, 3 rounded lobes, deep sinuses, toothed evenly and very defined. The top side is glossy and very dark, and they think it's a pinnacle, not a palm. John, can you understand that?
Yeah, I'm just, well, that's, I need more coffee. But yeah, a picture would help or a sample would help. But you know, alternate, lobed leaf, very serrate, popping up in a garden. So far to me, that's saying mulberry, which also has a shiny leaf to it. And if it has leaves that are deeply lobed and some of the leaves are not lobed and they are deeply serrated, deeply notched, you're probably looking at a mulberry, and those birds plant them everywhere. So send a picture so next week I can tell you whether I was right or not. I'd appreciate that. Where is this one?
You know, I don't have a location on that one.
I was going to say I'd be in Sioux Falls anyway. Tomorrow I was down there. I'd look at it. What the heck?
And then they have one more question. They want to know, how can a tree be a male tree or a female tree? How do you know if it's male or female? And on this tree, they haven't seen anything resembling fruit, just buds and leaves. So
I need more coffee. All right, well, we'll try to do this quickly, but most trees are not male or female. They're both. Explain that to the kids. But they have male and most of them, the flower is in fact male and female parts. Some have separate male and female flowers on the same plant. But there are, though these are the exception rather than the rule, we do have trees which are male or female. You know, it's not like apples. People used to come into the garden center at work and said, well, you know, I need a male apple tree. No, you don't. We don't make them. But coffee tree, Kentucky coffee tree, is male and female. Mulberry is male and female. You know, so you know, some people say I have a mulberry, it never has any fruit. It's either a guy or a very lonely gal. But as to how you tell, other than all the usual jokes people say it about now, really the only way you can tell is to look at the flower and to take a look and see if it has the male and female parts on it, and that's it. But quite honestly, if you know the plant, you'll know whether it's male or female, because again, that list of plants that have separate sexes, that are dioecious as we refer to it, is very, very, very small. I think mulberry and coffee tree and actually green ash. Ginkgo. Yeah, ginkgo. We don't have a lot of them, but ginkgo, you're right. Ginkgo is male and female because we don't want the females.
Right.
In fact, quite frankly, when they do have separate sexes, we only plant the males. We don't want the gals around because they produce fruit and nobody wants it.
And cotton.
And cotton, yeah.
Okay, this is an educational discussion here. All right, a question from Garvin, Minnesota, and I'm going to give a shout out to the Chandler Lake Wilson area too. I live on a small acreage, often manage thistles manually. If I cut a thistle after it's flowered, do I need to be conscious or conscientious about how I dispose of the plant? If so, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, well, the general rule of thumb for thistles and a lot of weed species is it takes about 10 days after flowering before you start producing viable seed. So, you know, that's a tricky thing to do because the thistles, you know, they generally will start flowering, you know, usually by the end of July at the latest, but there's a lot of variation there, so it's hard to really time that quite right. So, generally, yeah, you want to kind of be careful to minimize that seed spread. Yeah, I guess that's just generally it, 10 days after flowering. And then if you're within that window, if you're after that window, then you want to dispose of that plant properly so that the seed isn't going to spread.
Okay. Now we've got a question, and I didn't know if I was going to touch on this because it was a stumper for me. It's a question about a flower from Yankton. And I said, well, to me that picture looks like a daylily, but I was corrected and told not so much. I think we're going to go to that real quick.
It does look like a daylily. I think we need a sample into an extension office down there in order to really identify that type of flower. I would say daylily by the bloom, but it has a very tubular type stem there, which throws me off. So a sample into the local extension office would be an excellent way of getting that identified.
And the other thing is not a sample of the flower, but try to pull up that plant so we've got the leaves to it too.
The more sample, the better.
Right.
Okay.
Garden would be good.
Yes.
All right, a question from Mitchell, and we've got some images with this one as well. They sowed a new stretch of lawn last fall in new soil that was filled in around a new patio. Came up great, looked lush until 2 weeks ago. It's thinning out, especially under and around a maple tree. The part that gets full sun looks okay. There appears to be moss on the soil in spots. We've had quite a bit of rain. Neighbor's grass right next to it looks fine, though. They've not used chemicals on this new seeding, and the grass that is left does not come out when tugged on. I have not seen webs or moths in the yard. Again, that's from Mitchell.
Well, it could be a couple of things. I'll start out with something. I know Jerry's thinking of a few things too, but one of the things, and we've actually done research with this at SDSU, and that is the maples are just real light absorbers. And trying to grow good turf underneath a maple canopy is very difficult, and it's not because of root competition. It's not because the roots of the maple tree are interfering with it. It's the fact that it's reducing the amount of light. And more importantly, not only is there less light, about 10% of the normal sunlight beneath a maple, but it's the wrong light. The red and blue light that's used for photosynthesis has essentially been absorbed by the maple tree, and so what light gets down to the plant is more green light. And so the turf plant is actually growing abnormally and growing less. And that's just one of the problems with trying to grow turf underneath a mature maple tree or any maple tree. And the other thing people say, well, can I thin out the maple tree? And we've actually tried that in trials, and you have to remove about half the canopy before you're able to get enough sunlight to really grow good turf. So my recommendation, if it was a mature maple tree or one with some size to it, is the best way to grow turf underneath a maple tree is to limb it up, remove all the branches for the first 12 feet so you're getting sunlight from the side. But you know, when they said turf isn't doing very well, it's beneath the maple tree, that's clicked on for me, is that it might not be getting enough light.
Or rather than hack up your tree, just grow shade-tolerant turf. And there's a lot of chewing fescues and things like that that look a lot like Kentucky bluegrass, but are going to be much more shade-tolerant.
I thought you were going to say use dicamba
No,
and get rid of the
don't use
tree.
dicamba. Yeah.
You were scaring me there.
And because of the shade and probably the limited air circulation there, they're getting a mildew growing on that.
Yeah.
And the reason it's not affecting the neighbor's lawn, I think, it was mentioned this is a new seeding. Young, tender, seedling grass is going to be much more vulnerable to the mildews than established grass. And so that could explain the difference in the two lawns.
Well, and the other thing too, and you brought it up, even on the shade tolerant one, what I think is fascinating from some of the work that's done in Nebraska in that is part of it isn't shade tolerance as much as mildew tolerant.
Yeah.
Because you're right, the disease pressure in that shaded condition is also tough. It's just trying to grow trees and turf. I mean, we all want to do it, but it is a tough combination, and maples make it worse.
Okay. Is there a quick answer for this? What's the proper time to transplant rhubarb? That's from Yankton.
Proper time to transplant rhubarb is as early in the spring as you can get the spade or the shovel in the ground. Is that quick enough?
Okay. My understanding is that rhubarb is pretty rugged, and you could kind of cheat on that if it. I'm
but
wrong?
if you cheat on it, you better be giving it plenty of tender, loving care, some mulch, and baby it through, or else it may not make it through the first winter.
Okay.
Spring is the best time by far to do that.
All right. What's the proper time to trim arborvitae?
Well, now. But we're getting right up to the end of the window. I usually like to see arborvitaes, those evergreens, finish shearing them about the middle of August. Reason for that is if you shear them into September, it might cause new growth to occur, which will get hit by the frost. So you've got about another week, but wrap it up.
Okay. Well, that's about all the time we have for this evening. Just to let you know, Garden Line repeats twice each week on South Dakota Public Broadcasting's digital Channel 3. That's also known as the Create Channel. The encore broadcast can be seen Thursdays at 11 a.m. Central and Saturdays at 4 p.m. Central. Check your local listings to find South Dakota Public Broadcasting Digital Channel 3 where you live. Now it's time to say thanks. Gentlemen, thanks to our experts. John Lundgren, USDA Research Entomologist, Jerry Mills, Brown County Extension Horticulture Educator, Mike Mechnig, Extension Weed Specialist, and John Ball, Extension Forestry Specialist. Thanks to our phone volunteers, the Minnehaha Master Gardeners, and thanks to you for watching and calling in. Sorry I couldn't get to all your questions tonight. Have a good evening and happy gardening.
This program is funded in part by Swiftel Communications.